She was locked away in darkness, hidden from the world, and kept from the prince who was meant to see her shine. But little did they know, destiny had other plans. What happens when a cruel stepmother tries to destroy the one thing she fears most? What happens when the girl who's meant for greatness refuses to be silenced? Zama's world changed the day her mother, Mama Thandiwe, passed away. It happened so suddenly, like the sky losing its sun. One day she was there, humming songs while she braided Zama's hair, laughing gently as she cooked warm meals that filled the home with love. The next, she was gone, taken by an illness that no one saw coming. Zama's heart broke into pieces. Mama Thandiwe had been her safe place, her best friend, the one who whispered wisdom in the dark and held her close when she cried. Without her, the house felt colder, quieter, and something deep in Zama's heart dimmed. Baba Kito, though strong on the outside, carried his sorrow like a heavy mask no one could carve away. He loved his wife dearly and mourned her deeply, but life in Nzali had to go on. People still came to him for sacred masks, and though his hands continued to carve, his spirit seemed far away. After many moons of silence and sadness, Baba Kito made a decision that shocked Zama. He would remarry. He said he needed someone to help care for the home and believed Zama needed a woman's guidance as she grew older. The woman he chose was Madame Dola, a widow from a nearby village, who came with smiles, sweet words, and her own daughter, Kaisa. At first, Madame Dola appeared kind. She wore bright clothes, always kept the house tidy, and praised Baba Kito's work with wide eyes. She brought gifts for Zama, simple things like beads and hair ties, and told her that they would be a happy family. But something about her didn't feel right. Her smile never reached her eyes, and she was always watching Zama, watching the house, watching Baba Kito like she was measuring every moment. Zama tried to accept her, to be kind and open as her mother would have wanted. She even helped Kaisa settle in, offering to share her things and show her around Nzali. Kaisa, however, was not interested. She walked like she owned every room, looked at Zama with cold eyes, and never thanked her for anything. She had grown up spoiled, used to getting her way, and it showed. Zama, who had always lived simply and shared everything with love, felt the shift like a crack in the floor beneath her feet. Soon after Baba Kito and Madame Dola were married, the truth began to show. The sweet tone in Dola's voice turned sharp. The smiles vanished when Baba Kito was away, replaced with commands and cold stares. She gave Zama all the hard work, sweeping, washing, cooking, and even cleaning up after Kaisa, who now acted like a little queen. Madame Dola would praise Kaisa loudly in front of Baba Kito, calling her clever and beautiful, while Zama's efforts were ignored. Whenever Zama tried to speak up, Dola would twist her words, turning Baba Kito's trust against her. Baba Kito, busy with his carvings and often traveling to deliver masks, didn't see the change. Dola made sure he never saw it. She hid her cruelty behind the sweet tea and gentle lie. Zama, now without her mother and slowly being pushed into the shadows of her own home, held on to the lessons Mama Thandiwe had left her. She remembered her mother's warmth, her quiet strength, and the way she always said, "Light doesn't fight the darkness, it just shines." So Zama continued to shine, quietly. She did her chores without complaint, helped the elders in the village when she could, and stayed kind even when no one was watching. Her heart still hurt, but she refused to let the darkness inside her grow. She cried alone sometimes, missing her mother more than ever. She would sit under the moon, whispering to the stars like they could carry her words to Mama Thandiwe. But behind those soft tears, something was building, a quiet strength, a fire that wouldn't be put out. She didn't know it yet, but her story was far from over. Even as Madame Dola tried to dim her light, Zama's spirit was becoming something even brighter. And in time, the truth would rise like the sun, and when it did, no one would be able to hide from its glow. As soon as Baba Kito left for his carving journeys, everything inside the house changed. The soft voice of Madame Dola turned sharp, and her fake kindness vanished like smoke. She no longer called Zama dear child or smiled sweetly. Instead, her eyes grew cold and her words cut deep. She ordered Zama around as if she were a servant, not a daughter. From morning until night, Zama was forced to clean every corner of the house, cook all the meals, wash the clothes, and even polish the floors until her fingers ached. And if anything wasn't perfect, Madame Dola would shout or make her redo it all. At the same time, Kesa lived like a princess. She woke up late to warm water ready for her bath and fresh food placed before her. While Zama worked in the kitchen or swept the yard under the hot sun, Kesa would sit with her feet up, brushing her hair or admiring herself in the mirror. Madame Dola praised her constantly, saying how smart and beautiful she was, while pretending Zama didn't even exist. Zama's clothes were now old and faded, while Kesa was given colourful new dresses and jewellery. The difference between them grew wider every day, and the house that once felt full of love became a place of silence and struggle. Zama tried to tell her father once, when he returned home. She waited until they were alone, her hands trembling, and quietly said things were not how they seemed. But before she could finish, Madame Dola entered the room with a tray of tea and a warm smile. She gently placed a hand on Zama's shoulder and laughed, saying, "She's just missing her mother, that's all. She's still adjusting." Baba Kito, tired from travel and trusting his new wife, nodded and said nothing more. Zama felt her heart sink. She had been invisible in her own home, and now her truth was being buried too. Madame Dola became even bolder after that. She knew Zama had no voice, no power. She started calling her names, whispering insults in her ear when no one was around. "You'll never be like Kesa," she'd sneer. "You're just the daughter of a mask maker, and when your father's gone, no one will care about." Zama would bite her lips, hold back her tears, and keep working. She didn't want to give Dola the satisfaction of seeing her cry. The villagers started noticing small things. Zama, once glowing and full of energy, now walked with tired eyes and quiet steps. Yet she never complained, never said an unkind word. When people greeted her, she still smiled, even if the light behind it had dimmed. Some whispered among themselves, wondering what was happening inside Baba Kito's home, but no one dared to interfere. Despite everything, Zama's heart remained gentle. She still helped the old woman across the path carry her basket. She still gave her food to hungry children when Dola wasn't looking. She still whispered goodnight to her mother in the stars. Her kindness was not a show, it was who she was, no matter how unfair life had become. But in secret, Zama began to dream. Not big dreams of riches or escape, but small, powerful ones. Dreams of standing tall again, of one day being seen and heard, of proving that kindness is not weakness. That strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet, like the beat of a strong heart in the dark. One evening, after a long day of work and harsh words, Zama stood at the window staring into the night. The moonlight touched her face, and for a moment, she felt her mother's presence beside her, like a soft hand brushing her cheek. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. "You taught me to be light," she whispered, "so I will be light, even here, even now." What Zama didn't know was that her light, though hidden, was growing stronger every day, that the masks her father carved were not the only ones in the house. Madame Dola's sweet face was just a mask too, and masks always fall, sooner or later. And when they do, the truth is revealed. Zama's time was coming. The world hadn't seen her yet, but it would. And when it did, her quiet strength would shine brighter than anything anyone expected. Zama had been through so much, yet something in her never gave up. Day after day she worked in silence, moving like a shadow through her own home, cleaning, cooking, and doing all the chores while Kesa lived like royalty. But what Madame Dola didn't know was that every time she tried to crush Zama's spirit, Zama became stronger on the inside. Her pain didn't harden her, it polished her. It taught her patience, kindness, and a quiet courage that no one could take away. As the years passed, Zama began to change, not in a loud or obvious way, but like the slow bloom of a flower after the rain. Her beauty wasn't just in her face, though she had grown into a stunning young woman with soft brown skin that glowed in the sun and eyes that seemed to hold the stars. Her true beauty was in the way she moved through the world with grace, humility, and a heart that still believed in good things, even when life had given her little. The villagers noticed. Even though she was no longer the little girl they remembered, her spirit remained the same. She still helped anyone who needed her, carrying water for the old, caring for sick animals, picking fruit for the hungry, and she did it all with a quiet smile, never asking for anything in return. People began to speak about her in hushed, admiring tones. "There's something about that girl," they would say. "She carries light in her." Mothers told their daughters to watch how Zama treated others, how she walked with her head high, even when others tried to pull her down. Boys in the village would pause just to catch a glimpse of her as she passed, but Zama paid no attention to the looks. She was too busy holding herself together, too focused on keeping the promises she made to her mother, to stay kind, stay strong, and never let hate enter her heart. Kaisa, who had once enjoyed being the center of attention, began to feel the shift. People no longer praised her just because she wore fine clothes or walked with pride. They compared her to Zama, and no matter how hard Kaisa tried to shine, it was Zama's light they followed. Kaisa grew jealous, her words sharp and cold, but Zama never responded with anger. She knew who she was, and that was enough. Even in the quiet corners of the market, old griots would whisper, "That girl, Zama, she has the soul of a queen." But Zama never heard those words. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just lived as she always had, doing what was right, not what was easy. Inside the house, nothing had changed. Madame Dola still gave her the hardest tasks and treated her like she was invisible. But Zama didn't complain. She found moments of peace in small things, in the rhythm of scrubbing pots, the sound of birds at dawn, the feel of cool water on her hands. She found strength in remembering her mother's voice, repeating those soft, powerful words, "Be the light, my child." And light she became, not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that warms hearts without trying. She didn't need to fight to be seen. Her presence alone spoke louder than any word. It was in the way she listened, truly listened, when someone spoke. It was in her silence, full of calm and wisdom beyond her years. People began to look up to her, not because she asked for it, but because she had become something rare, a soul untouched by cruelty, a heart still full of love. Even the wind seemed to favor her, brushing her hair gently as she walked. Children ran to her with stories, elders nodded in respect, and even strangers felt something special when they stood near her. Zama had grown into more than just a young woman. She had become a symbol of quiet strength, of beauty that came from within, of hope that could survive anything. She had no idea that the very qualities she carried, the grace, the wisdom, the unshakable kindness, were the ones the world needed most. And though Madame Dola tried to keep her hidden, her light had already begun to shine far beyond the walls of that house. What waited ahead for Zama was more than she could imagine. But for now, she stood steady like a flame in the wind, soft but unbreakable. One morning, the village of Nzali woke up buzzing with news that felt like thunder rolling through the trees. A royal messenger had arrived, dressed in fine cloth and riding a tall white horse. He stood in the center of the village square, scroll in hand, and read aloud the words that would change everything. Prince Lumo, the son of the great king from the highlands, was coming to Nzali, but not just for a visit. He was looking for a bride, not a bride with jewels or gold, not one born into riches or fame, but a woman with strength in her spirit, kindness in her heart, and wisdom in her soul. The prince wanted a queen who could stand by his side, not just in beauty, but in bravery. The news spread faster than wildfire. Every home, every market stall, every water well echoed with whispers and gasps. "The prince is coming here?" people asked. To Nzali, it seemed like a dream, but the royal seal on the scroll said it was real. Excitement filled the air like sweet perfume. Mothers began brushing their daughters' hair with extra care, sewing new dresses, and teaching them how to walk with grace and speak with softness. Young women practiced their smiles in mirrors and tried to imagine what it would be like to be chosen by a prince. Madame Dola, upon hearing the news, dropped the spoon in her hand and gasped. Her mind raced like lightning. This was her chance. She turned to Kaisa with fire in her eyes. "You will be queen," she said firmly. "You have beauty. You have style. What else could he want?" From that moment, the house became a stage for Kaisa. Madame Dola ordered new fabrics from nearby towns, taught her daughter how to curtsy, and made her rehearse polite conversations as if she were already royalty. She believed nothing and no one could stand in Kaisa's way. But deep down, Dola feared one thing: Zama. She had watched the way people looked at her stepdaughter, that soft glow in Zama's eyes, the way the villagers respected her, even when she wore old clothes and carried baskets of laundry. Madame Dola couldn't explain it, but it bothered her. She knew Zama had something rare, something no amount of cloth or jewelry could create. It was the kind of beauty that couldn't be taught, and in a contest of inner strength and character, she feared Zama might win the prince's heart without even trying. Zama, on the other hand, didn't think of herself at all. When she heard the news, she simply smiled and continued washing dishes. The idea of meeting a prince didn't excite her or fill her with dreams of castles. Her world was small, filled with daily chores and quiet moments. She had learned not to expect anything grand, not love, not praise, not magic, but still, a tiny spark flickered in her heart. Not for the prince, but for the thought that maybe, just maybe, the world was about to change. The village elders spoke often in the days that followed. They reminded the people that this prince was different. He was raised to believe that a crown should rest on someone who could lift others, not just shine for herself. He had seen enough of fake smiles and greedy hearts. Now, he searched for truth in a woman's soul. Zama heard these words and carried them like a whisper in her spirit. She had never been allowed to dream big, but something inside her stirred. Could there be a place in the world for someone like her? Someone who had never been given much, but still gave everything she had. Meanwhile, Madame Dola grew more desperate. She forced Zama to stay out of sight whenever visitors came. "Your clothes are too plain," she snapped. "You'll embarrass us." She made sure Kaiser was always in the best light, always ready to be seen. But no matter how hard she tried to hide Zama, the villagers still remembered her. They still talked, and when they spoke of strength and kindness, it wasn't Kaiser's name they mentioned. As the day of the prince's visit drew closer, a strange feeling filled the village. It was more than excitement. It was hope. Hope that someone would be chosen not for how loud they spoke, but for how deeply they cared. Hope that true beauty would finally be seen, even if it had been hidden for so long. And somewhere in the quiet corners of Nzali, as she swept the floors and folded worn linens, Zama felt that hope too. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe, not in fairy tales, but in the truth that maybe, just maybe, being kind, strong, and true was enough to change everything. Madame Dola had always believed she could control everything, what people saw, what they heard, and even what they thought. But as the day of Prince Lumo's visit came closer, she felt something slipping from her grip. She had dressed Kaiser in the finest clothes, taught her to walk like a queen, speak like royalty, and smile just right. Still, whispers in the village made her uneasy. People talked too much about Zama. Even when they didn't see her, they remembered her, how she helped, how she smiled, how she carried herself with quiet strength. It made Madame Dola furious. This was supposed to be Kaiser's moment, not Zama's. She began watching Zama more closely, looking for any sign that she might try to stand in Kaiser's way. But Zama didn't seem interested in the prince or the visit. She did her chores like always, kept her head down, and stayed out of trouble. Still, Dola's fear only grew. She knew Zama didn't need fancy dresses or makeup to catch someone's eye. Her light was natural, and it shone from the inside, and that scared Dola more than anything. So, she made a decision, a dark one. One afternoon, while Babakito was away carving masks in another village, Dola called Zama into the house. "I need you to clean the storeroom," she said. "It's behind the kitchen, it's very dusty, and I don't want guests to see it like that." Zama nodded, as she always did, and walked to the small, rarely used room. The moment she stepped inside, the heavy wooden door slammed behind her. Before she could turn around, she heard the lock click from the outside. Her heart pounded as she pushed on the door. It didn't budge. "Madame Dola!" she called, confused. "I'm locked in." But there was no answer, only silence. Zama banged on the door harder, calling louder. Still, no one came. She looked around the room. It was small and dusty, filled with old baskets, broken furniture, and the smell of dry wood. A tiny window sat high on the wall, but it was too small to climb through. Her chest tightened. What was happening? Outside, Madame Dola leaned against the wall, listening. She could hear Zama's voice, soft and scared, from behind the door, but she didn't care. She turned and walked away. "Let her stay there," she whispered to herself. "Let the prince choose Kaiser without any distractions." She believed her plan was perfect. No Zama meant no competition. Kaiser didn't ask where Zama had gone. Maybe she knew, or maybe she didn't want to know. Either way, she stayed quiet, focused only on herself and her chance to become a queen. Inside the locked room, Zama sat down slowly. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to breathe. This wasn't the first time she had been treated unfairly, but this was different. This was cruel. She didn't cry. Instead, she closed her eyes and remembered her mother's voice. Even in the dark, my child, you are still light. She held on to those words like a lifeline. Outside, the village was being decorated for the royal arrival. Flowers were placed on every doorstep. Drums were practiced. People wore their best smile. And in the heart of it all, Zama, the girl with the strongest spirit, was locked away, hidden behind a wooden door by someone who feared her glow. But light, no matter how hidden, always finds a way to shine. Old Ayo, the village griot, was known for his stories that wrapped around hearts like warm blankets. He had lived through seasons of joy and sorrow, and many said he had the gift of dreams that told the future. One night, just before the prince was to arrive, Ayo had a dream so strange, it pulled him from sleep before the first rooster crowed. In the dream, he saw a girl glowing like the moon, locked in a dark room. She didn't cry or shout. She just sat there, her light softly pushing back the shadows. Around her, a storm of lies and jealousy swirled, but she stayed calm, waiting. The dream ended with the girl stepping into sunlight, her glow so strong it made even the clouds bow. Ayo sat on the edge of his bed, heart pounding. That girl, he whispered to himself. She is real. He didn't know how or where, but something deep inside told him she needed help. Later that day, as he walked through the village, his ears picked up a sound, faint, almost like a whisper. He stopped. The sound came again, soft, like someone calling from far away. Curious, he followed it, step by step, until it led him behind Babakito's house. There, near the kitchen wall, he heard it clearly now, muffled cries. Someone was inside. His heart clenched. "Ayo," came the voice, faint and tired. "Child, who's in there?" he asked. "It's me, Zama," she replied, her voice shaking. At that moment, everything from the dream clicked into place. He called for help. A few villagers rushed over, and together they broke the heavy lock. The door creaked open, and there she was, Zama, dusty and weak, but still glowing with that soft light the dream had shown him. Her eyes were tired, but calm, her spirit unbroken. The villagers stared in shock. "What happened?" someone asked. Zama stepped forward slowly. "I was sent here to clean," and then the door closed. No one needed more explanation. They knew who had done it. And as word spread, people's hearts turned. The girl they had always admired had been hidden, locked away like a secret, but secrets always find their way to the surface. Ayo helped Zama stand. "You have a light," he said quietly, "one that no darkness can hide. I saw it in my dream, and now the world will see it too." And just like that, the wind shifted in Nzali. Zama was no longer the girl in the background. She was the one destiny had whispered about, and the truth, finally, had begun to rise. The morning of the royal gathering arrived with golden light spilling over the hills of Nzali. The village buzzed with excitement as drums echoed, colours danced in the wind, and everyone gathered near the central grounds. The prince was there, seated under a decorated canopy, eyes calm and thoughtful. Girls from all around had come dressed in their best, including Kesa, who stood near the front in a gown stitched with shiny beads and golden thread. Her smile was wide, but her heart raced. Today she was sure she would be chosen. The crowd hushed as Prince Lumo stepped forward, scanning the faces before him. He greeted the villagers kindly, then looked around as if searching for something or someone. Suddenly, a murmur rippled through the crowd. Zama was walking toward them. Her dress was simple, worn and torn from days locked away. Her hair had not been brushed with care, and her feet were dusty, yet she walked with quiet grace, her chin held high, eyes steady like the morning sun. People turned, whispering her name, surprised but moved. There was no jewelry, no grand entrance, only a soft strength in her steps that made even the wind pause. Prince Lumo noticed her instantly. As she came closer, he tilted his head slightly, sensing something different about this girl. "Who are you?" he asked, though he might have already known. "I am Zama," she said softly, "daughter of Babakito." The prince studied her, not her clothes or her appearance, but the way she stood, unafraid, honest. Something about her presence felt real, deeper than beauty. He looked at the others, then back at her. Kesa stepped forward, trying to speak, but Zama's quiet courage had already changed everything. The villagers began to whisper again, not about her dress or her late arrival, but about how even now she looked like a queen. Zama didn't beg to be chosen. She didn't explain where she had been or accuse anyone. She simply stood in truth, and somehow that truth shined brighter than all the silks and gold around her. And as the prince looked into her eyes, something shifted. The moment of choice was no longer about title or appearances. It was about soul. And Zama's soul, though wrapped in torn cloth, was the most radiant thing in the village. The silence after Zama's arrival was heavy, like the calm before a storm. Prince Lumo, still watching her, turned to the crowd and asked in a firm voice, "Why did this young woman arrive late and in such a state? Who is responsible for this?" Everyone shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting, unsure of what to say. Then Madame Dola stepped forward, forcing a smile. "She must have been delayed," she said quickly. Perhaps she lost track of time, but before she could say more, Zama gently raised her hand. Her voice was soft but steady. "I was not delayed," she said, her eyes meeting the prince's. "I was locked away." A gasp ran through the crowd. Zama didn't speak with anger, but with quiet strength. She didn't point fingers or raise her voice. She simply told the truth. "I was sent to clean a storeroom, and the door was locked behind me. I called out, but no one came. I stayed there for days, until someone finally heard me." Prince Lumo's brows furrowed. Who would do such a thing? Again, Zama didn't answer with blame. She looked down for a moment, then back up with courage shining in her eyes. "Sometimes people are afraid of light they cannot dim," she said. "But even when hidden, light finds its way." Her words struck deep. The villagers looked at her, not with pity but with pride. One by one voices rose. "We saw how she worked day and night. She helped the elders, even when no one asked. She shared food when she had little. She never complained." The truth poured out, not just from Zama, but from the people who had watched her grow. The same people Madame Dola thought wouldn't notice had been watching all along. Madame Dola's face paled. She opened her mouth, but no defense came. Her lies were unraveling, thread by thread. Prince Lumo stood in silence for a moment, looking at Zama, then at the crowd that now stood behind her. "A true queen does not need a crown to shine," he said. "She is revealed by her truth, her strength, and the hearts she touches." And in that moment, with no jewels, no riches, and no polished words, Zama stood taller than any throne could ever make her. The truth had spoken, and the village had listened. Prince Lumo stepped forward and gently took Zama's hand. "You are the one," he said, "not just to her, but to all of Nzali. Not only my bride, but the queen this village deserves." Cheers erupted as the villagers celebrated the justice they had longed for. Madame Dola and Kesa were sent away, their lies no longer welcome. Zama, once hidden in shadows, now stood in the light. Her story of grace, strength, and truth was told again and again around every fire, becoming a legend. She didn't just marry a prince. She became the heart of Nzali's future.